And there's one other aspect that needs to be brought to your attention because it's important, and I don't believe any other source has identified it for you, and that is the monitoring role of irregularities during the election period. I went through 3 elections. They're about 35 days long, the election period. We put together a team comprised of investigators, legal staff assigned to them. We're on the ground every day during the election period. We double shift so that we cover 12 hours a day, and the complaints flow in from returning officers, members of the public, political parties, as to what's going on during that 35-day period. We're monitoring the election, and we're taking action to ensure that the rules are being followed. We have dedicated contacts within the political parties because we will ask the political parties to straighten out something that may be going on that they're better able to deal with. We have contacts with municipal police forces. What we do is we take the complaints, we put them in the computer, we run them up the screen, we assign investigators if something needs to be done, and we get after it. Not with the idea of prosecuting charges down the way, but with the idea of regulating the playing field as the campaign rolls along. As you well know, there's a never-ending complaint about signs. Municipalities don't like them if they interfere with traffic. Landlords don't like them when the tenants put up big signs in the windows. Signs get stolen. People have signs on their property that they didn't approve of. Signs are put on signs. Signs are put on government signs. Sign teams have fights over the best places to put up the signs. We sort these things out. A candidate wants to get inside a condominium. A lot of people living in condominiums these days to campaign. The management doesn't want them in there. The regulations of the condominium corporation may prohibit them from getting in there. We make contact with the condominium corporation. We'll contact the lawyers if we can find them, read them the Riot Act, here's the law, sort this thing out. A candidate's entitled to reasonable access to a condominium, an apartment building, a shopping center. These are the things that get dealt with. You may recall the oddball one in Quebec where there was a journalist who got access to a ballot box and photographed the ballot box open. It looked like it had been damaged and beaten up, made quite a fuss over it. We looked into it immediately. The matter was sorted out by our investigators, a municipal police force, the returning officer, and members of the parties on the ground who looked at the box and were satisfied that the ballots inside the envelopes had not been disturbed, and they all agreed they could be accepted. Sealed it up, got on with business. These are the kinds of things that happen during, well, you know this yourselves as to what goes on in an election period. So we're there 35 days in a row, 2 shifts a day, watching this stuff, not to prosecute down the road, to regulate. This is a regulatory statute. I don't know who's going to do it in the next election because I'm certain the DPP isn't going to do it. I don't know who else is going to do it. Could someone else at Elections Canada do it? I don't think they have the skill set. Investigators have a particular skill set. Our investigators are all mostly 30-year police veterans. They're very good at getting municipal police forces to look into our matters when they aren't priorities for them. So there's a very practical aspect of this that you need to be aware of in the removal to a different agency, which, as I say, doesn't have the expertise and is used to acting in an independent way from investigators. Removal of the Commissioner from Elections Canada does nothing to enhance the independence of the office. I have to tell you, political interference is non-existent. I never encountered it in any form at all. I never had an investigator advise me that there's been anybody trying to interfere with an investigation. The Chief Electoral Officer in my time maintained a strict hands-off approach, and the decisions were made by myself and the Director of Public Prosecutions with regard to prosecution matters. As far as how we do things and what we do, we put together a 19-page document which is on our website of Elections Canada, to tell the public what we do and how we do it. And it's available to anybody that wants to take a look at it. I should say it's not usual for investigators to be associated with a prosecutor's office. I worked in a prosecutor's office for many years. In the regulatory context in particular, although prosecutors do prosecute regulatory offenses, their main preoccupation, and that of the DPP, is with criminal code offenses, drug offenses, terrorist offenses, money laundering, tax evasion, things like that. It's not common in the common law context for investigators to be working out of a prosecutor's office or to be associated or under the umbrella of, even in a general way. The investigators are usually located with the agency responsible for implementing the legislation. That's primarily because it's a regulatory agency, and the goal is not prosecution. The goal is compliance. Personally, I don't like prosecutions. I just as soon get compliance with the requirements of the Act and the goals of the legislation. What happens, and is happening more though, is it gets adversarial. Witnesses refuse to be interviewed. Witnesses are discouraged from being interviewed. It becomes adversarial. If they had cooperated and we were able to get to the bottom of something in a timely way, and that does happen, there are other avenues besides prosecution that can be used to obtain compliance. We have a compliance agreement, in fact, that we can use, and it's used in many minor cases for that matter. There are serious cases that you can't go that way. You do have to investigate with an eye on prosecution. But prosecutors generally want to take an independent view of an investigation after it's completed. In fact, the less they have to do with the investigators beforehand, the better. And if they have been involved with the investigators because they had to make a court application, someone else in the office will do that decision to prosecute. The prosecution role is who to charge, what to charge, who not to charge. And if it's criminal, it goes to court, in a criminal court. Let me say a few words about election or voter fraud, which is something of a concern to you. We looked into a number of cases of alleged organized voter fraud when I was commissioner. The complaints were found to be without substance and no charges were pursued. And I put out a press release on 2 of these, and another one was looked into by a company called Navigant. A few cases of individual illegal voting were prosecuted, but in my opinion, while administrative errors were found, significant voting fraud was not taking place. I came into the job as an outsider, and what struck me as interesting was the ethics that are at work in the electoral process. Of the 60% of people that vote, they're very serious about it. They're very concerned for it, and they support the system and the process enormously. That was my first observation. And similarly, the people at Elections Canada were impressed by the role that they were performing, from the most senior to the most junior person. It begins with a fair election and a reliable result. That's the beginning of the democratic process. That's my little speech for today.
Super.